Part 54. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 532. Princess Yi Yang is one of the many princesses in the royal family. The husband's family she married is not very prominent among the many consort families, but Princess Yi Yang's reputation is the greatest among all the princesses. It is better to provoke the king of hell than to provoke Yi Yang. This saying is widely circulated among the powerful circles of the capital. Everyone keeps a respectful distance from her and does not want to provoke her, which shows how powerful she is. Princess Yi Yang Mansion. Zhang Chao returned to his house with a depressed look on his face. When a maid saw him, she immediately bowed and saluted and said, "Your Majesty." Zhang Chao sat down, took a sip of cold tea, and asked, "Is the princess at home?" The maid looked at him, her eyes evasive, and whispered, "Yes, yes." Seeing the maid's expression, Zhang Chao understood what was going on, and his face became more gloomy. This meant that Princess Yi Yang must be with one of her concubines at the moment, and she also brought someone home. But he was used to this. Although the two of them were husband and wife, they always played their own roles and never cared about each other's affairs. He couldn't control how many concubines the free-spirited Princess Yi Yang had, and she couldn't control how many concubines he kept outside. The only thing connecting them was profit. Most of the money used to support Princess Yi Yang's luxurious life was obtained by him from the Zhaoqi camp, and with Princess Yi Yang's influence, he could sit back and relax while doing these things. Zhang Chao was sitting in the hall, and the maid stepped back to deliver the message. After a while, a figure walked in from outside with her waist twisted. The woman, who was in her 20s, had heavy makeup on her face, and her clothes were a little messy. She walked across from Zhang Chao, sat down with her legs crossed, glanced at him, and asked, "Why are you back at this time?" "Zhou Xiaoyi, I can't stay any longer." Zhang Chao glanced at her and said, "All my people have been replaced. I don't want to get any more money from there in the future." "What?" Princess Yi Yang stood up and frowned. "Who did it?" In her opinion, the only use of Zhang Chao, a Zoulang general, was to get some money back from there from time to time. If even this use disappeared, she really wanted him to be of no use at all. "Who else could it be?" Zhang Chao looked gloomy and said, "I don't know what your Majesty is thinking. Why would you send a civil servant to Zhou Xiaoyi to serve as Zhonglang general?" After a while, after listening to what he said, Princess Yi Yang had a cold face and gritted her teeth and said, "How can this be unreasonable?" Royal Palace. Emperor Chen accompanied an old woman while wandering in the imperial garden. After a while, he turned to look at her and said, "Your Majesty, it's cold outside. I'll have someone help you back." The old woman, who was not gorgeously dressed, shook her head and said, "I'm feeling depressed after staying in the palace. It's hard to get out for a walk, so let's walk a little longer." She took 2 steps and said, "Manor used to come here often to chat with me and tell me a few jokes, but I haven't seen her come recently. Manor has left the palace and opened a mansion." Emperor Chen looked at her and said, "How about I let her move into the palace again and stay with you?" The Queen Mother waved her hand and said, "The girl's family is old and she wants to go out for a visit. It's better not to let her come back." Chen Huang said, "Manor is willing to practice for 3 years and pray for the Queen Mother for the sake of her health. She still thinks of the Queen Mother in her heart." "It's nonsense, it's just nonsense." The Queen Mother looked at him and said dissatisfied, "There are several girls in the girl's family who can delay it for 3 years. If she delays it for another 3 years, how can she find a good husband? Manor is nonsense, and you are alone. Why are you, a father, following her nonsense?" Chen Huang said, "She also has a pure heart." The Queen Mother seemed a little unhappy because of this incident, and Emperor Chen didn't say much and walked silently with her. When they were walking somewhere, there was a sudden noise from behind. "Princess, your Majesty is taking a walk with the Queen Mother, you can't go in." "Slave dog," Open your eyes and take a look, you dare to stop me. Chen Huang turned around and looked behind him, frowned and asked, what's going on? Wei Jian looked at it and said, Your Majesty, she seems to be Princess Yi Yang. What does she want to cause trouble? Chen Huang frowned even more, and after a moment he said, let her come over. Yes, Wei Jian walked to the back, and after a while, he came over with Princess Yi Yang. Princess Yi Yang walked up to Emperor Chen, bowed and said, Yi Yang has met my father and the Queen Mother. Emperor Chen looked at her and asked, what happened when you entered the palace this time? She has many princesses, and many of them are married. Most of these married princesses live their own lives peacefully, with the exception of Princess Yi Yang. Almost every once in a while, she would go into the palace to cause trouble. Considering that she was his daughter, Emperor Chen always turned a blind eye to her matters, but he was actually quite worried in his heart. To annoy her. The most recognized shrew in the capital is actually a princess of the royal family. Where does this put his face? As soon as Emperor Chen asked, Princess Yi Yang's face fell. She squeezed out a few tears and cried, Father, my son has been bullied and my consort has been bullied. I beg your father to make the decision for my son. Chen Huang glanced at her and asked, you bully others on weekdays, who else can bully you? Father is unjust. Princess Yi Yang cried even more sadly and said, this time the son-in-law and the consort were really bullied. The person who bullied the consort was bullying the son-in-law, and the man who bullied the son-in-law was bullying the father and the royal family. Father must punish him severely. Chen Huang looked at her exaggerated performance and was not moved at all. He asked, tell me, what is going on? Princess Yi Yang immediately said, it's a man named Tang in the Zioqi camp. After he entered the Zioqi camp, he acted arbitrarily and colluded with the military department to make Zhou Xiao a mess. He dismissed generals at will and installed his own people. I felt that, he wants to turn the imperial army into his own private army. Although Princess Yi Yang only said a few words lightly, if this crime is really carried out, even if it does not implicate the 9 tribes, it will be a capital crime. Turning the imperial army guarding the capital into his private army is a rebellion. Huang Chen glanced at her, his expression still unchanged, and asked, are you talking about Tang Ning? Princess Yi Yang nodded repeatedly and said, yes, that's him. This person has ulterior motives and may have rebellious intentions. Father, I have to guard against him. I forgot that your consort is also in Zhou Xiao. Huang Chen looked at her and said, the Tang Ning you are talking about, I asked him to do this. How do you do small tricks in Zhou Xiao on weekdays? You can turn a blind eye, but not this time. Tell Zhang Chao to be honest with me, otherwise, even if Tang Ning can tolerate him, I can't tolerate him. When he talked about the latter part, there was already some harsh scolding in his tone. Princess Yi Yang shivered, but she did not expect that things were completely different from what she thought. Her father's protection of this person had reached a level that was difficult for her to understand. She could hear the seriousness in her father's tone, suppressed the aggrieved look on her face, and whispered, my lord knows. She is usually arrogant and domineering, but she can still be calm and cool in the capital because she knows when to be arrogant and when not to be arrogant. The same thing, if the timing is wrong, may lead to 2 completely different results. Chen Huang waved his hand and said, it's good to know, please step back first. After Princess Yi Yang withdrew, the Queen Mother looked at Emperor Chen, shook her head, and said, this child Yi Yang has been spoiled to death by you. I have heard many ridiculous things about her in the palace. Chen Huang sighed and said, no matter what, she is my daughter. The Queen Mother looked at him and said, but when you married Manor away to Chu State, it would be nice if you could have thought that she was your daughter. Chen Huangdao, whether it is Manor or Yi Yang, they are the princesses of Chen State first, and my daughters second. They have unshirkable responsibilities for the future of Chen State. He looked at the Queen Mother and said, I can be confused about small things, but when it comes to the country, I have to be ruthless. You. The Queen Mother looked at him, sighed, and said, You look more and more like your father. Emperor Chen looked forward and said, I will definitely fulfill my father's unfulfilled last wish. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 533. The Queen Mother walked in the imperial garden and felt a little sleepy. She was helped back to the palace. Emperor Chen stood at the gate of the imperial garden and shook his head and said, The Queen Mother is more tired than before. Wei Jian said slowly, the imperial physician said that the Queen Mother's illness is like this. She is more prone to drowsiness than ordinary people. Emperor Chen said again, Have you found Dr. Sun? Wei Jian shook his head and said, No, Dr. Sun will not stay in one place for too long. He should be traveling around to find medicine again. Maybe he is no longer in Chen state. And Dr. Ling said that even Dr. Sun can only extend the Queen Mother's life for a few years at most, and cannot cure the Queen Mother's illness. Emperor Chen sighed and said, It would be good if he could extend her life for a few years. He retracted his gaze from the front and asked, Am I really ruthless? Wei Jian was surprised and said, How can your Majesty have such an idea? Your Majesty is not ruthless at all. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, You don't have to flatter me. I want to hear the truth today. Wei Jian said, This old slave never tells lies in front of your Majesty. Okay, you have followed me all your life. Even if you said something wrong, I will not blame you. Those people never dare to tell the truth in front of me. I am tired of listening to them. Come on, I want to hear what you really think. Wei Jian looked at Emperor Chen, hesitated for a moment, and then said, Your Majesty is a little ruthless. What? Emperor Chen showed anger on his face, looked at him, and asked, Tell me, how am I ruthless? Wei Jian looked at him and said calmly, Your Majesty is ruthless to corrupt officials, and ruthless to the barbarians on the grassland who threaten the border of my Chen state. It is because of your Majesty's ruthlessness that the world can be peaceful and the people can live and work in peace. Your Majesty's ruthlessness is the world's ruthlessness. Emperor Chen looked at him, shook his head, and said, It's a pity that you are a eunuch. There are only 4 left out of the 10 lieutenants, and there are only 5 with Lu Jun. Tangning has no choice but to let them each manage 2 camps first. Zhang Chao had said his harsh words long ago, but he never put them into action. Instead, he became listless and avoided Tangning. Not only that, Zhang Chao never expressed any opinion about his dismissal of those lieutenants. Lu Jun's matter was resolved, but Mu Yu and the others' matters were not resolved. However, Tang Ning had asked Xiao Ju to collect evidence of their crimes. As long as they were submitted to the Ministry of War, several positions would be vacated. In a barracks somewhere, several soldiers looked at Zhang Chao and said anxiously, Zhang Zoulang Zhang, Xiao Yu Lang Zhang have collected our evidence, you have to think of a way for us. Zhang Chao was drunk and poured another glass of wine. He pulled the corner of his mouth and said, I have collected it. What do you want me to do? This won't work. One person said anxiously, if he hands those things to the Ministry of War, won't we end up like Wei Xiaoyi and others? Zhang Chao drank the wine in the glass and asked, does this have anything to do with me? After Princess Yi Yang came back from the palace, she scolded him. Only then did he understand the confidence of Tang Ning to be rampant and arbitrary in Zhou Xiaoyi. With his majesty behind him, he naturally dared not do anything else, otherwise, let alone Wei Xiaoyi, even he, Zhou Langzhang, would have finished his job. If you can win, fight. If you can't win, hide. At this point, he didn't think much about it. He would stay in the Zhou Xiaoyi for one more day. As long as Tang Ning stopped and didn't bother him, it would be fine. The soldier looked at him and said, General Zhang, You can't do this. We are still doing this for you. Bang. Zhang Chao put down his wine glass suddenly and said angrily, "Are you threatening me?" The man immediately said, "I dare not." Zhang Chao looked at them, and after a moment, he waved his hand impatiently and said, "Okay, okay, don't worry. You are lucky this time. It's useless even if he gets your evidence." The soldier looked at him carefully and asked, "What does Zhang Lang mean by this?" Tang Ning unexpectedly found that the soldiers whose evidence Xiao Ju got were still frightened when they saw him in the morning, but they were beaming at noon. If it was just one person, it would be fine. Maybe his wife at home gave birth to a child and he was happy. But the possibility of everyone's wife giving birth to a child was pitifully small. He originally thought that they had something to rely on, but when he returned home at night and sat on the roof with Zhao Man to watch the stars, he finally found out the reason. Tang Ning looked at her and asked in surprise, "Amnesty?" Zhao Man nodded and said, "Father said that he decided to grant amnesty to pray for the royal grandmother and accumulate good deeds. All prisoners in cases before today can be granted amnesty. Amnesty is something that emperors often do. When the emperor ascends the throne, changes the reign title, establishes the queen or the prince, or encounters a natural disaster, an amnesty order is issued to pardon some criminals. This kind of amnesty is a thorough amnesty. Those who have not yet been prosecuted will no longer be prosecuted, those who have been prosecuted will be withdrawn, those who have been sentenced to serve their sentences will have their sentences declared invalid, and they will not even have a criminal record. Of course, this rule does not apply to everyone. Those who are guilty of treason, murder, and arson, and extremely serious crimes are not included in the amnesty. The biggest reason why emperors did this in ancient times was to win people's hearts. Of course, the Chen state now has a clear sea and rivers, and Emperor Chen does not need to use this to unite people's hearts. The main purpose of his amnesty is to accumulate blessings for the Queen Mother. Those who commit treason, gross rebellion, and other evils other than the 10 evils will be forgiven. However, this pardon also has a time limit and is only valid for prisoners before the amnesty. Those who want to take advantage of the amnesty to commit crimes will be punished more severely. Zhao Man held her chin with both hands and said, "Father also said that the birthday of the emperor's grandmother is coming. This birthday, the palace will have a big event, and it will be lively." People in this era generally believed that liveliness would bring good luck. When someone was seriously ill, they would get married or hold a birthday party, hoping to drive away bad luck. Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "What disease does the Queen Mother suffer from?" Zhao Man shook her head and said, "The imperial doctor said it was diabetes, and there is no way to cure it. We can only try to extend her life." When Tang Ning heard the name diabetes, she shook her head slightly. Diabetes is diabetes, a disease that is controllable and untreatable in the era of advanced medical care. In this era, there is no effective drug control at all. What science cannot yet do, it is obviously impossible for Chen Huang to do it through a general amnesty and a birthday banquet. He put his arm around Zhao Man's shoulders and said, "Don't be sad. Birth, old age, illness, and death are all human beings." Zhao Man looked up at him and asked, "If I get old and become an old woman, will you still watch the stars with me?" Tang Ning hugged him tighter and said, "In my heart, you will always be a fairy who never grows old." A general amnesty is a major event. In the current era, it was only done once when His Majesty ascended the throne. For those criminals who made minor mistakes, this was an excellent opportunity to eliminate their guilt. This is what several of Zhou Xiaoyi's soldiers who joined the army thought. What they committed was not a serious crime, it was nothing more than corruption and malfeasance. In the face of amnesty, they would forget about it and not even leave a criminal record. So what if he is arbitrary? Can he disobey His Majesty's orders? It's really a cliffhanger this time. Fortunately, I met the amnesty. I was really scared to death. If Tang Zhonglang had waited 2 days to hand over those things to the Ministry of War, he would have missed the amnesty. Several soldiers who joined the army gathered together, and they were all very happy. A man passed by them, holding a stack of files or something like that in his hand. A soldier looked at him and asked, "Wang Sija, what do you have in your hand?" The man stopped, looked back at them, and said, "This is the file that Tang Zhonglang asked me to get back from the Ministry of War. He said that he would revise it and send it over in 2 days. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 534. Tang Ning did not comment on whether the general amnesty was a good thing or a bad thing. It was a means of winning the hearts of the people and promoting the people's awareness of doing good. The unique characteristics of the feudal system cannot be evaluated with the thinking of later generations. However, the soldiers in the Zhou were not included in the amnesty because they were 2 days late and missed this policy. Somehow, General Zhang Zhuolang has been much more honest in the past 2 days. I don't know if he has completely given up on himself and stayed in the tent all day. He didn't cause trouble for Tang Ning, and Tang Ning was too lazy to find trouble with him. After all, Zhang Chao also had the identity of a son-in-law, which was considered a royal relative. If he still held on to him, it would be a disrespect to Emperor Chen. Zhang Chao was willing to be his idol-left general, so Tang Ning fulfilled his wish. The affairs of the Zioki battalion have almost been arranged. There are still a few captains left. It is really hard to find anyone, so he can only promote a few more from the bottom. On the parade ground, Ling Feng led the 500 men of the 2nd Battalion to run around the parade ground, making a great noise. A young captain ran forward 2 steps, panting, and asked, "Captain Ling, I heard that General Tang is your brother-in-law. What do you think?" Ling Feng glanced at him and said, "General Tang's wife is my cousin. If he is not my brother-in-law, what is he?" The captain said, "I can't believe that you and General Tang have this kind of relationship." He thought about it, looked at Ling Feng again, and asked, "Captain Ling, do you know why General Tang has not arranged a captain for the 1st Battalion?" Actually, Ling Feng was also curious about this matter. So far, 9 of the 10 captains of the left cavalry battalion have been assigned, but Tang Ning has not arranged a captain for the 1st Battalion. The 1st Battalion is the most important personal guard battalion among the 10 battalions. The captain of the 1st Battalion is also the leader of the personal guard. It is better to be absent than to be unqualified. Loyalty must be guaranteed. In addition to loyalty, it must also be sensible. It is indeed not so easy to decide. The matter of the cavalry battalion came to an end for the time being. Those who should stay will stay, and those who should leave will leave. Training is not Tang Ning's strong point. Old Zheng will arrange everything. He came out of the cavalry battalion and returned to the city, preparing to sit for a while at Tianrunju. When he walked to the door, he happened to meet another group of people. As far as he knew, King Kong seemed to have been released from confinement during this amnesty. The 3-month confinement lasted only more than a month before it ended. King Kong also benefited from the amnesty this time. He should be holding a banquet here, surrounded by his supporters. Next to King Kong was a strange middle-aged man. Judging from where he was standing, he should be the most distinguished person in the group except King Kong. Prince Kong also saw Tang Ning, glanced at him, then looked away and said to the middle-aged man beside him, "Mr. Su, please." Mr. Su's eyes stayed on Tang Ning's face for a moment, then he smiled and said, "Your Highness, please go first." Mr. Su. After Prince Kong and others left, Tang Ning muttered, then shook his head, walked into Tianrunju, and chose another way. Not long after, Tang Yu was walking by the lake of Tianrunju. She looked at him and asked, when will you bring Yao Yao here? I have something to say to her. Tang Ning said, she hasn't come home yet. I'll bring her here when she comes back. Tang Yu nodded and said, how come Xiru and Xiao I haven't gotten pregnant in such a long time? I've prepared the clothes for the children. Tang Ning said awkwardly, they are still young. It's not suitable for them to have children now. Su Mei looked at him and said, they are not young anymore. If they are not suitable, what age do you think is suitable? Tang Ning thought for a while, looked at Su Mei, and said, at least the same age as you. Su Mei, 23 years old, is obviously more suitable for having children than Xiru and Xiaoi, who are 18 or 19 years old. Tang Yu looked at Tang Ning with some reproach and said, why are you talking to Mei-er? She's not married yet, and you're so outspoken. Su Mei glanced at Tang Ning and said indifferently, it's okay, I'm used to it. Tang Ning explained, what I mean is, from a medical point of view, she is now the most suitable age to have a child. When she gets old in 2 years. Su Mei looked at him, and the corners of her mouth raised a little arc, 2 years. I said it wrong. Tang Ning sensed a hint of danger from her, realized his mistake, and immediately changed his words, I mean, in a few years, in a few years. Su Mei put her wrist on Tang Ning's shoulder and smiled, let's go over there and talk about how many years it will be. I'm very interested in this matter. Tang Yu looked at Tang Ning, who was held hostage by Su Mei, walking forward, with a smile on her face, and slowly walking along the lakeside. On the other side, 2 figures walked out of the main building, holding a tree by the lake and vomiting non-stop, and the surroundings were full of alcohol. Well, thanks to this amnesty, otherwise, His Highness would have to be confined for 2 months. I heard that the Queen Mother's health is not good, and I don't know how long she can last this time. Your Majesty really took a lot of trouble for the Queen Mother's birthday this time. This is unprecedented. After the 2 vomited, they supported each other and continued to talk. At a certain moment, one of them paused, looked at the lake, and said in surprise, hey, look at that person over there, is she Tang Yu, the second daughter of the Tang family? The other person shook his head and said, you are really drunk. Tang Yu, the second young lady of the Tang family, has been missing for more than a year. How could she appear in the capital? What's more, I have seen Tang Yu before, and she is obviously not like that. Maybe my eyesight is dazzled. The man shook his head, took 2 steps, looked back in surprise, and murmured, but except for the face, everything looks the same. Today is the first day that King Kong lifted his ban. King Kong was so happy that he held a banquet in Tianranju and returned home drunk. In Prince Kang's palace, Prince Kong bowed deeply to Mr. Su and said, Su, Mr. Su, it was my fault in the past. You, please don't take it to your heart. King Kong said with drunken eyes, when you leave, I feel like I have lost my brain. I don't even have anyone around me to make suggestions. I will definitely listen to you in the future. Mr. Su looked at him and said with a smile, Your Highness is drunk. King Kong waved his hand and said, although I am drunk, I speak from my heart. From now on, Mr. Su's wishes in this palace will be my, Zhao Cheng's wishes. The other people around him were shocked when they heard this. From what King Kong said, he seemed to regard Mr. Su as his backbone, and it seemed that he would respect Mr. Su even more in the future. It goes without saying that in the days since Mr. Su left, King Kong almost caused a catastrophe. A wise and resourceful counselor like Mr. Su should be taken seriously everywhere. Faced with King Kang's words, Mr. Su just smiled slightly and said to a servant of the palace, why don't you help your highness to have a rest? The servant showed respect on his face, nodded and said, yes, Mr. Su. The lifting of Prince Kang's ban and the return of Mr. Su should be the 2 major events in Prince Kang's mansion in the past 2 days. Because of the mistakes he had made, King Kong gave Mr. Su enough trust this time. All the affairs of the palace were managed by him. He had become the veritable first steward of the palace. Even his apprentices were in the palace. The status has become higher and higher. Mr. Xiao Su. When the young man walked out of Prince Kang's mansion, the concierge immediately saluted respectfully. At this time, a sedan stopped in front of Prince Kang's mansion, and a man hurriedly walked down and said, "I want to see His Highness Prince Kang. I have something important to report to His Highness." The young man looked at him and said, "Your Highness is still drunk. If Master Wu has anything to do, you can report it to Mr. Su first." As a member of Prince Kang's party, Wu Yong naturally knew Mr. Su's position in Prince Kang's palace. After thinking for a moment, he immediately said, "Please take me to see Mr. Su quickly." A moment later, in a room in Prince Kang's mansion, Mr. Su looked at Wu Yong and asked, "What's important, Mr. Wu?" Wu Yong said seriously, "I found the missing second lady of the Tang family." Mr. Su's eyes moved from elsewhere to his face and asked, "Which Tang family?" Wu Yong said, "Of course it's the Tang family of Prince Duan. Didn't the second lady of their family disappear a long time ago? I saw her in Tianashanju yesterday. She was with Tang Ning. For His Highness, this is an excellent opportunity. If used well, it can hit Tang Ning and the Tang family at the same time." Mr. Su looked at him and asked, "Are you sure you really saw the second lady of the Tang family?" "It's absolutely true," Wu Yong patted his chest and said, "Wu knows countless people. Although her appearance has changed, I am sure that she is the second young lady of the Tang family, Tang Yu." Mr. Su nodded, looked at him again, and asked, "Are you the only one who knows about this matter?" Wu Yong nodded and said, "I discovered this incident by chance when I was having dinner at Tianashanju last night. After thinking about it all night, I determined that the woman was Tang Yu. I came to report to your Highness early in the morning. There was no second thought. I know it personally." Mr. Su nodded again, looked at him, smiled and said, "Very good. Fortunate young gentleman." Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 535. When Wu Yong was about to walk out of Prince Kang's mansion, he always had a strange feeling in his heart. The disappearance of Tang Yu, the second young lady of the Tang family, once caused a great stir in the capital. In the end, neither the Ministry of Punishment nor Dali Temple found anything useful, so the case had to be dropped. Now that he saw Tang Ning and Tang Yu together, if he reported it to the court, Tang Ning would be guilty of a serious crime. If it was done well, even the Tang family could take a hit. The Tang family is King Kang's mortal enemy, and the relationship between Tang Ning and King Kang is different from before. This incident can be said to kill two birds with one stone. If King Kang learns of this news, he will not only reward him heavily, but also praise him. But when Mr. Su learned the news, he didn't show any joy. While Wu Yong paused and thought, a woman with a gauze face walked slowly past him, causing several servants in Prince Kang's palace to whisper. "I didn't expect that Mr. Su, who seemed quite serious, was actually just like us. He returned to his hometown once and actually brought back a woman from the western regions. Is it so strange that a hero has a hard time being a beauty? What's wrong with a man who has several beautiful concubines in his house? Then there's no need to be so stingy. You're still wearing a veil, as if you're afraid of being seen. In our eyes, there's no difference between those women from the western regions." Listening to everyone's discussion, Wu Yong suddenly stopped in his steps, turned around stiffly, and watched the veiled woman from the western region disappear in front of a door. A steward of Prince Kang's mansion looked at him and said with a smile, "Mr. Wu, don't look at it. That is Mr. Su's woman. Besides, her face is covered, so you can't see her face. To identify who a person is, it is not necessary to see the face. In fact, it is easy to be deceived by just looking at the face. The face can be changed through disguise, but her demeanor, temperament, and even the habitual movements when walking are generally difficult to change, and no one will deliberately change it. Knowing this, even if her face is covered with a veil, her true identity cannot be concealed. Recognizing people through things other than their faces is his strength. Wu Yong was not thinking about this matter at the moment. What he was confused and frightened about was why the maid from the western regions that Tang Jing spent a lot of money to buy was at Mr. Su's place. He seemed to have thought of something, his face began to turn pale, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. At this moment, he finally understood what was strange about what Mr. Su just said. What he said just now clearly meant that he wanted him to die. Mr. Su is King Kang's most trusted advisor. From the woman from the western region, it can be seen that he and the Tang family obviously have close ties. If this matter is revealed, it will be beneficial to the Tang family and harmless to King Kong. It will not happen in any case. Harm Mr. Su's interests. He couldn't figure it out, but that wasn't the point. The point was that Mr. Su wanted him to die. Wu Yong turned around and raised one foot, but he didn't know where to go. One road is in the direction of King Kang's bedroom, and the other is the road to Mr. Su's residence. Among the two roads, there may not be a way to survive, but there must be a way to die. He stood there, silent for a long time, and finally chose one and took a step. In Mr. Su's room, the young man looked at him and said, "Sir, Wu Yong cannot be kept here." The woman who just walked in with a veil on her face said, "I will arrange for someone to get rid of him immediately. There are many ways to shut him up, why bother killing people?" Mr. Su waved his hand and said, "The Lord has said that everyone has the right to life, and no one can take it away at will." The young man thought for a while, frowned and said, "The king is kind, but Wu Yong." An attendant came in and said, "Mr. Su, Lord Wu Yong and Wu want to see you." A trace of doubt appeared on the young man's face. Mr. Su looked at the man and said, "Let him come in." Wu Yong walked in with difficulty, and when he walked in front of Mr. Su, he knelt down with a pop and said, "Wu Yong is willing to submit to Mr. Su. In the future, Mr. Su will follow his lead." Mr. Su looked at him and said calmly, "Master Wu, what are you doing?" Wu Yong said, "As for the second lady of the Tang family, it is entirely up to Mr. Su to make the decision. Mr. Su can handle it how he wants. Wu Yong knows nothing, has never seen anything, and will not tell Prince Kong." Mr. Su looked at him for a long time, and finally a strange look appeared on his face, and asked, "How did you see it?" Wu Yong looked at the woman from the western regions in the room and whispered, "I saw her being bought back by Tang Jing that day." The woman from the western region took off her veil and looked at him in surprise. Wu Yong knelt on the ground, cupped his hands and said, "I swear I will not tell anything about what happened today. From now on, Wu Yong will only be driven by Mr. Su." In Prince Kang's mansion, Prince Kang, who had just woken up from a hangover, walked out of his bedroom and saw a man walking out of a certain courtyard and asked, "What does Wu Shaoqing want from me?" Wu Yong looked at Mr. Su beside him, sipped his saliva, and said, "Back to your highness, the Queen Mother's birthday is approaching. Your Majesty ordered the Ministry of Rites and Guanglu Temple to jointly organize this birthday. This shows that your Majesty attaches great importance to the Queen Mother's birthday. Your Highness, you must choose your gifts carefully to avoid being outdone by King Duan." Wu Yong was the Shaoqing of Guanglu, and Guanglu Temple was in charge of sacrifices, court gatherings, banquets, and banquets. On these matters, he had to get the news before others. King Kong looked at him and asked, "Is this why you are looking for me?" Wu Yong nodded and said, "Your Majesty, Prince Kong, must not underestimate this matter. Your Majesty knows your feelings for the Queen Mother. If you are compared with Prince Duan on this matter, your Majesty will still have a grudge in your heart even if you don't say it clearly." Although the weight of the gift represents the degree of sincerity, the imperial court had only banned extravagance and ostentation a few days ago. King Kong felt that Wu Yong was making a fuss, but he took his words to heart, waved his hand and said, "Okay, okay. Yes, I know." At the Kyoki camp, Tang Ning walked out of the barracks and looked at the people training on the school field, feeling a little bored. Zhou Lang completely gave up on Zhang Chao. Although he still came to Zioki camp every day, he didn't care about other things. Moreover, when he left every day, he had to put on the attire of an ordinary guard. Somehow he was stimulated. It is best not to mess with people who are stimulated. Therefore, Tang Ning also expressed concern about him arriving late and leaving early, and drinking in the camp. They all turned a blind eye. No one was looking for trouble, so he didn't know what to do. Thinking that there was one more thing he had not done, when he returned to the city at night, he and Xiaoju went to Lu's house. Xiaoju and Lu Ya were chatting with each other in the corner. Tang Ning explained the reason for her visit to Lu Tang. Lu Tang looked at him and asked in surprise, "Chenzhou, what do you want Chenzhou to do?" Tang Ning said, "Zhou Xiaoyi is still short of a captain. I think he is very suitable. He is just a captain now. Wouldn't it be appropriate to directly promote him to captain?" Lu Tang looked at Tang Ning and thought he was joking. He had been a member of the Yulin Guards for many years, and went on a mission to the Chu state with the regiment. Later, he achieved good results in the 16th Guards competition, and finally climbed to the position of captain. A small team leader under him could be on equal footing with him in a blink of an eye, which would inevitably make him feel a little unbalanced. "It's just a matter of self-defense," Tang Ning said. "Since he is just a team leader, you won't let him go, right?" Lu Tang shook his head and said, "It's useless if I agree. General Ling Yun needs to agree." "I'll take it as if you agree." As long as Lu Tang nods, it's just a matter of words from Ling Yun, and the cheap brother-in-law won't give him any face. However, before that, he had to ask Chenzhou what he meant. The Chen family where Chenzhou belongs is a branch of a certain Chen family in Beijing. The main line of the Chen family can only be regarded as a middle-class family. There is only one leader in the family, and it belongs to the lowest level. The reason why he wanted to be removed from the Yulin Guard was not because Tang Ning insisted on forcing him to do something difficult, but because he couldn't think of anyone more suitable for the position of leader of the guard than Chenzhou. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 536. Chen Qiang is just a collateral descendant of the Chen family in the capital. After getting married, he moved out of the main line of the Chen family. In fact, he is no different from ordinary people. The only thing that made him feel gratified was that the only son in the family was still up to his standards and served as captain in the Yulin Guards. Although he was only a small captain and could not compare with the most outstanding disciples of the Chen family, he was also already satisfied. At this moment, Chen Qiang, the head of the Chen family, was particularly kind. He looked at the middle-aged man opposite and said with a smile, "It's great that brother Zhao can agree to this marriage." The middle-aged man looked displeased and said, "A few days ago, a captain from Yinkai Guard also came to our house to propose marriage. When will your Chenzhou be able to sit in the position of captain? If it weren't for that unfilial daughter, I will follow your son life and death. Do you think I will agree?" Chen Qiang said awkwardly, "He is now the leader of the team. If he survives for a few more years, there may be hope." The middle-aged man said, "What kind of place is the Yulin Guard? Except for the disciples of Jingzhong, everyone who has survived to become the leader is already at the top." The middle-aged man's words were a bit harsh, but after all, he was asking for something, and Chen Qiang couldn't say anything. The middle-aged man did not continue talking, but changed the topic and said, "You can marry my daughter, let's talk about it. A good betrothal gift must not be missing a penny, the wedding must be a big one, and everything must be of the best quality. After all, the Chen family is just a small family. They can afford the bride price requested by the other party, but it will be difficult to meet his request." Chen Qiang looked at him, wondering, Brother Zhao, what about this marriage? This is nothing to discuss. The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, I am just a daughter. Marrying your son is already a grievance. If I am even grievanced in these scenes, can I not be wronged in the future? The middle-aged man made it clear that he looked down upon the Chen family. Chen Zhou stood behind him, his expression aggrieved, but he could not get angry. He glanced away and saw a figure walking over accompanied by servants of the Chen family. At this time, the middle-aged man looked at him and said, My daughter married into your Chen family, if you dare to make her suffer in the future, I... He stopped abruptly before he finished his sentence, because Chen Zhou ignored him and strode forward. The middle-aged man pointed at him and said angrily, You. Chen Zhou strode forward, saluted Tang Ning, and asked respectfully, General Tang, why are you here? Tang Ning looked behind her and asked, Are there any guests? Chen Zhou nodded, and Tang Ning looked away and said, Since we have guests, I'll get straight to the point. The Zhouziaoei 1st Battalion is still short of a captain. Are you interested? Chen Zhou was startled and asked, Colonel, Colonel. Tang Ning nodded and said, I've already said hello to Lu Teng and Ling Yun. If you want to come over, you can report directly to the camp tomorrow. After saying that, he waved his hand and said, I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. It wasn't until Tang Ning's figure disappeared that Chen Zhou calmed down. When he was about to catch up, Chen Qiang had already walked up to him, looked at him, and said dissatisfied, Your father-in-law is talking to you, why are you? No, I don't have an uncle like him. Ignored by his uncle, who looked down on him, the middle-aged man walked out the door with a sullen face. If you don't give him some clues this time, he will never know how high the sky is in the future. When he walked to the door of Chen's house, a young man came over. He looked at him in surprise and asked, Dad, why did you go back so soon? Have you agreed? What are you talking about? The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, The Chen family doesn't take our Zhao family seriously at all. Even if I raise her for the rest of my life, I won't let her get married. What's going on? The young man looked at him, and then said in surprise, By the way, Dad, why is General Tang here? The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, What General Tang? The young man looked back and said, General Tang Zhonglang of our Zhouziaoei, that's the one who walked out of Chen's house just now. Dad, didn't you see that just now? The middle-aged man was startled and asked, Is this the General Tang who you said is very powerful? The young man nodded and said, If General Tang hadn't completely cleaned up Zhouziaoei and vacated many positions, I wouldn't have been able to become the captain of the 1st Battalion so quickly. Hey, Dad, what are you doing? Going back again. Chen family, in the courtyard, Chen Qiang looked at Chen Zhou and asked, You said that the one just now was General Zhouziaoei. He came to our house to ask you to become the captain of Zhouziaoei. You are a small captain, go over there. Can you be a captain? Chen Zhou also nodded in disbelief and said, General Tang said that if I am willing to go, I can report to the camp tomorrow. Is there such a good thing in the world? Chen Qiang looked at him and asked warily, Could he be a liar? Chen Zhou shook his head and said, General Tang will not lie to me with such a thing. The good son-in-law is right. How could the in-laws think so? How could General Tang lie to others? A figure walked in from outside, looked at Chen Zhou, and said reproachfully, General Tang came to Chen's house in person, why don't you stay with him for a cup of tea? You are so ignorant of etiquette. Chen Qiang looked at him and said in surprise, Brother Zhao. Hey, we are almost a family. Why should we call them Brother Zhao? We should call them in-laws. The middle-aged man looked at him and said, I have already made arrangements for them to get married next month. Chen Qiang was stunned for a moment and said, I'm afraid it's a bit rushed next month, we still have to raise some money. The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, No need to raise money, my Zhao family will take care of their marriage. We are all family, so we don't care about these things. After he finished speaking, he looked at Chen Zhou and asked, "Did General Tang really let you be a lieutenant?" Chen Zhou nodded. The middle-aged man asked again, "Which battalion?" Chen Zhou said, "The 1st Battalion. The 1st Battalion is the personal guard battalion. The lieutenant of the 1st Battalion must be the confidant of the confidant, and he has a bright future." The smile on the middle-aged man's face became even brighter. He patted Chen Zhou on the shoulder and said, "Since General Tang appreciates you so much, you must work hard. It happens that your eldest brother is also in the 1st Battalion. I need you to take care of him in the future. Zhou Xiaoyi is now the leader of the 16 guards. Being a lieutenant in Zhou Xiaoyi will naturally have a much better future than being a Yulin guard." Chen Zhou reported to the camp the next day. Tang Ning also heard that he was going to get married next month. He originally thought that he had already started a family. After all, without years of practice, he definitely wouldn't be that good at roping. Now it seems that he may still rely more on his talent. The lieutenants are actually the backbone of each guard. Drinking is prohibited in the military camp. After a day of training, Tang Ning took the lead and brought all of them to Tianrunju. The 10 lieutenants should be withdrawn or replaced. Although these 10 people cannot be said to be loyal to him, they are at least conscientious and are seriously fulfilling their responsibilities as lieutenants. Now that they are not in the military camp, everyone is more relaxed. After drinking a few jars of wine, they are also a little drunk. Those who can't drink well have drunk a lot. Tang Ning looked at the waiter who served the wine and asked, "Is shopkeeper Su here?" The waiter nodded and said, "Yes." Tang Ning stood up, looked at everyone, and said, "You drink first, I'll go out for a while." A lieutenant burped and stood up and said, "General Tang, are you going to find Miss Su? Why don't you call her out? We don't know what the most beautiful woman in the capital looks like." Ling Feng also said, "Yes, why not let Miss Su come out and play a song?" "Drink your wine." Chen Zhou stood up, pushed the 2 people down, and then walked to Tang Ning and said, "General Tang, I'll see you off." Tang Ning left the main building and walked into Su Mei's yard. Chen Zhou stood at the gate of the yard, holding a knife and leaning against the wall. In the elegant pavilion of the main building, Ling Feng took a sip of wine, patted the table, and said unconvincedly, "What ability does that Chen have? He became the 1st Battalion lieutenant just after arriving. I really don't understand. How is Chen better than me?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 537. Su Mei was unusually busy today. When Tang Ning walked in, she was sitting alone in the yard, looking up at the moon in a daze. Seeing Tang Ning walking in, she looked away, stood up, stretched her body, and asked, "Newlywed Yan'er, why don't you spend more time with your third wife?" Even if he wanted to accompany the third lady, he had to obtain the consent of his father-in-law. After Tang Yaoyao came back, rich man Tang seemed to have no intention of letting her come back. He had endless arrangements for her every day. It seemed like she was going to take over all the Tang family's business. Tang Ning walked over, sat across from her, and said, "Bring them to Tianrunju for dinner and stop by for a visit." "It just so happens that I have something to tell you." Su Mei looked at him and said, "I have to go on a long trip, so I will leave my mother to you. Xiao Tao, you can also help me take care of her. It's been a long time since the Tang family's incident happened, and outsiders were not allowed to enter or leave the inner courtyard. It wouldn't be a big deal to take the mother over, but it was the first time Tang Ning had seen her speak so solemnly about it. Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "Where are you going and how long will you be going?" "Jiangnan." "As for how long it will take?" Su Mei shook her head and said, It could be as short as 3 to 5 months, or as long as a year and a half. Tang Ning usually wouldn't ask in detail about Su Mei's matters, but this time it was obviously different. He looked at Su Mei and asked, "Is there any danger?" "Don't worry," Su Mei looked at him and said, "I'm not going alone, Master will be with me." Since she said this, Tang Ning didn't ask any more questions. She just wanted to find a time to pick her mother up before she left. After a while, in the secluded courtyard of Tianran, Tang Yu looked at Su Mei with a glimmer of light in her eyes. She then looked at Tang Ning and said, "Jiangnan, I've heard that Jiangnan is good, with picturesque scenery and pleasant climate. Your dad once said he would take me to Jiangnan, but I have never been to Jiangnan yet." Su Mei held her hand and said with a smile, "I have a mission this time, and it may be a bit dangerous. When I get free time in the future, I will take my mother to Jiangnan to see it." Tang Yu looked at her and asked worriedly, "Why is there still danger?" "It's a little dangerous." Su Mei said without caring at all, "I might choke to death while eating." "It's a bit dangerous, but it's okay." Tang Yu patted the back of her hand and said, "Crow's mouth, ba ba ba." Tang Ning looked at the scene with a smile. Apart from Tang Shui, Su Mei probably had the best relationship with her mother. However, this time Su Mei could not take her with her on her trip to the south of the Yangtze River. When she had the opportunity in the future, she would definitely take her with her. She went to Jiangnan to see. He sat in the courtyard for a while, and then walked out of the courtyard when it was estimated that the time was almost up. Chen Zhou walked over slowly and followed him silently. Chen Zhou was better than Ling Feng and others because of his understanding and eyes. This was also the main reason why the 1st Battalion captain could not be other than him. On the way from Su Mei's courtyard to the main building, Tang Ning unexpectedly met someone. Mr. Su seemed to be walking by the lake, and when he met Tang Ning, he stepped aside slightly. A fool and as arrogant as Prince Kong could actually respect others, so when Tang Ning saw Mr. Su for the first time, she paid special attention to him. This person gives the impression that he is just a gentle scholar, but at first glance he is a scheming counselor type. It is said that King Kong was able to keep up the fight with King Duan over the years because he was assisted by a counselor named Su, and it should be him. But there is no reason for such a smart person not to see that King Kong is actually a puddle of mud that cannot stand up to the wall. I am afraid that even in Chen Wang's mind, if he really has to choose between King Kong and King Duan, the probability of King Kong being eliminated is very low. Be bigger. But this is someone else's choice. Tang Ning hopes to see such a talented person beside King Kong who can compete with the Tang family and King Duan. Su Mei left the capital in early February and went to Jiangnan. The daily flow of tourists in Tianranja remains the same, but the small courtyard is empty. The most beautiful woman in the capital has always been mysterious, and it is common for her not to appear in public eyes for 10.5 months or even several months. Late one night before Su Mei left, Tang Ning took Tang Yu back home, and Xiao Tao, whom Su Mei had entrusted to him, also temporarily lived in the Tang family. The most important thing that the court pays most attention to recently should be the birthday of the Queen Mother. When the mother of Lu Feng, the Minister of Rites, celebrated her 60th birthday, Lu Feng was just a little extravagant and was demoted to another state. A good thing turned bad. Not long after this, the emperor's mother-in-law celebrated her birthday. She was not even 60 or 70 years old, but it had already caused an uproar in the entire capital. The ostentation was so grand that it was rarely seen in the world. By then, all the people in the capital who were above the 6th grade officials will all participate, plus the orders of each family's concubines, etc. The cost is probably equivalent to Lu Feng's mother's 60th birthday 60 times. This kind of participation is mandatory. Anyone who doesn't go means not giving the emperor face. If he doesn't go, he doesn't wish the Queen Mother happiness and longevity. No one dares to let the emperor remember him because of this incident. Tang Ning's 3 family members, Jiaoming, will also attend when the time comes. The Queen Mother's birthday was approaching, and Zhao Man became worried. She had been worrying about what gift to give the Queen Mother for several days. The Queen Mother lacked for everything, and the things she gave couldn't be too cheap, too vulgar, or too popular. Looking at her sad face, Tang Ning pinched her face and said, "Okay, you don't have to worry anymore. Leave this matter to me." Zhao Man jumped up happily and asked, "Really?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "I promise it won't be cliché and will not surpass all the gifts given by others." Zhao Man kissed him on the face and said, "Then I will go shopping with my two sisters." Tang Ning was going shopping today, but not with Xiao Yi or Zhao Man, but with Xiao Ju. Of course, it was not that he had any other thoughts about Xiao Ju, but they had something important to do. The gunpowder in the cavalry battalion was too old and could no longer be used. Moreover, the level of gunpowder and firearms in the army was a little worse than Tang Ning had imagined, and it was in urgent need of improvement. Tang Ning himself did not have the ability to do so, and he would not rashly improve these things and joke with his life. There were many fireworks shops in Beijing, and those fireworks craftsmen were really familiar with gunpowder, and they were definitely more familiar with the power control of gunpowder than anyone else. Being a fireworks craftsman was really unfair to them, and they were more than enough to be military advisors. Between the New Year and the Lantern Festival, or during any festival, these fireworks shops are the most popular. On weekdays, they are deserted and there are not many customers. Tang Ning and Xiaoju walked into a shop, and the shopkeeper immediately came up to them and asked with a smile, "What do you want, sir? We have everything here, including sky rockets, firecrackers." Xiaoju asked, "Did you make all these fireworks?" "Of course," the shopkeeper said, "this is my ancestral craft, which has been passed down for several generations. This craft is unique in the capital." "Okay." Xiaoju waved his hand and said, "Report to the left cavalry camp tomorrow morning." Hearing Xiaoju's words, the shopkeeper's face changed, and he said in a trembling voice, "Little, I abide by the law on weekdays, but I haven't committed any crime." After explaining to him for a long time, the shopkeeper realized that they were not here to arrest people, and he agreed with some trepidation that he would report to the cavalry camp on time tomorrow. This matter actually has some sense of coercion, but if they can stay in the army, not only will they have no worries about food and clothing for the rest of their lives, but if they are lucky, they can also benefit their descendants. After visiting several fireworks shops, Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning and asked, "We have already found 3, how many more do you want to find?" Tang Ning said, "There are 2 more, choose one from the 2. Xiaoju knocked on the door of another shop and looked at an old man who came out. Just as he was about to ask a question, he was suddenly stunned and looked at his empty sleeves. The old man looked down and said, "I was tinkering with fireworks when I was young and accidentally blew them up. Do you want to buy fireworks?" Xiaoju was about to ask a question, but Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "No need to ask, it's him." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 538. On the mountain behind Zhou Xiaoyi's camp, loud noises have always been heard in the past 2 days. Fortunately, there are no ordinary villages around the camp, and there is no disturbance to the people. Tang Ning felt that since gunpowder had already appeared, it could not be wasted. The trend of history was irreversible. Sooner or later, this thing would play its due role on the battlefield. In this case, just let it exert its power earlier. Of course, he didn't have the professional knowledge in this area, and he was afraid of death, so it was better to leave things like improving gunpowder to special people. Most of these fireworks craftsmen have been passed down from generation to generation, and the formulas in their hands are different, and the power of the gunpowder they create is also different. When they gather together and communicate with each other, they can use small gunpowder to make flowers. Generally speaking, Ordinary people would not pass on this heirloom skill even if they died, but no one wanted to miss the opportunity to transform from a businessman to a military official and spread it to their descendants. Tang Ning had already requested an order from Emperor Chen to build a separate firearms camp outside of Zhouziaoyi to specialize in the study of firearms and gunpowder. The request had been approved. There is no need to worry too much about the safety of these people. Anyone who has been tinkering with gunpowder for a lifetime and can still stand in front of him and gasp is a selected elite. Xiaoju came over, looked at him and asked, "Is it useful to invite those people?" Tang Ning said, "We'll find out later." In fact, after several people's communication and research, in 2 days, they have created a gunpowder that is more powerful than the military's secret recipe. Although it is only a little bigger, it is still progress. It won't take long. More advanced and mature products will appear. Tang Ning glanced at Zhang Qiao, who had changed into ordinary guard clothes and walked out of the military camp, and asked Xiaoju, "What happened to General Zhang Ziulang?" Xiaoju looked back and said, "Maybe he went to have a private meeting with a sweetheart again." Private meeting? Without a private meeting, that woman won't live long. Xiaoju glanced at him and said, "Otherwise, where do you think Princess Yi Yang's reputation as a shrew came from?" On the surface, he doesn't care about Zhang Qiao's romantic affairs outside, but once his love affair outside is known to her, it will sink into trouble the next day. Princess Yi Yang was indeed cruel. Tang Ning was secretly grateful. Fortunately, the ladies in his family were all good, unlike Xiaoju who guarded a tigress. If he dared to have other lovers in this life, his lover would not be betrayed. Casually, the possibility of him being casoned is quite high. He gave Xiaoju a pitiful look and said, "I'll go to the back mountain to take a look. Keep an eye on the camp. The Queen Mother's birthday is getting closer and closer, and no one in the capital, from the common people to the powerful, knows about it." On the occasion of the Queen Mother's birthday, Emperor Chen hosted a banquet for all the officials and dignitaries of the capital and offered a general amnesty. Notices were posted all over the world, wishing that everyone in the world would congratulate the Queen Mother. Under such circumstances, Tang Ning could not be too stingy. Discussed with Xiaoju, and each prepared a gift that was neither too heavy nor too light. Tang Ning always wondered if Chen Huang, who loved money as much as his life, had the idea of taking the opportunity to accept gifts. The gifts he received at the Queen Mother's birthday banquet would make him laugh out loud in his dreams. In the inner courtyard of the Tang family, Tang Yu handed a small bundle to Tang Ning and said, "Tomorrow is Shui'er's birthday. Help me give this to her." Tang Ning weighed the baggage and found that it was not heavy. She asked curiously, "What is this?" "I sewed the clothes for her," Tang Yu explained. "From the time she was born, I have personally sewed a set of clothes for her every year." She treated Tang Shui better than her own mother. No wonder Tang Shui had been kissing her since he was a child. Tang Ning picked up the bag and said, "I'll give it to her tomorrow." Natural residence, somewhere in a remote corner by the lake. There are not many gardens with lakes in Beijing, and Tianshanju is one of them. Although the lake here is not big, it is not small either. There are green trees around the lake. Whenever night falls, in the woods beside the lake, it has become a holy place in the hearts of young men and women. Whatever etiquette and restraint, after the night fell, nothing was left that was eroded by the night. Tang Ning stood in a remote place by the lake. She looked at Tang Shui who was walking over. She handed the small bundle in her hand to her and said, "Mom asked me to give it to you." Tang Shui took the gift, looked at the shadows in the woods behind him, and whispered, "Just let someone deliver it." "Why did you choose this place?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "Send it to the Tang family. What if someone discovers it?" If he wasn't worried about being seen by the Tang family, he wouldn't act like he was having an affair underground. Tang Shui no longer struggled with this issue and asked, "Where's yours?" Tang Ning asked, "What's mine?" Tang Shui frowned and said, "Where is your gift?" "I forgot to prepare, next time, I will remember it next time," Tang Ning said. "I'm leaving first." Tang Shui stood there, holding the small bundle in his hand, feeling a little disappointed. This trace of disappointment only flashed through her heart, and she turned to leave. Boom! At this moment, there was a sound of stones falling into the water from behind. She subconsciously turned her head to look, only to find that a ray of light shot straight into the sky from across the lake. When it reached the highest point, it exploded and turned into silver flowers all over the sky. Before she could recover, there were 1, 2, and countless rays of light soaring into the sky. Bundles of fireworks exploded in the sky and reflected on the lake, making the world look like daylight. During festivals in the capital, large families would set off fireworks to celebrate, but she had never seen such a grand scene. At this moment, not only the guests of Tiananmen, but also almost all the people in Beijing were attracted by this gorgeous fireworks show. So beautiful. I've never seen such beautiful fireworks. I don't know whose handiwork it is. How much money will it cost? The gorgeous fireworks lasted for half a quarter of an hour before they showed signs of dissipating. However, just when everyone sadly thought that the fireworks were about to end, several more fireworks shot into the sky, but this time, the fireworks exploded. After that, it did not disappear, but left a few words in the sky. The flowers are bright and golden, and the fragrance is blown away from afar. Could it be a certain girl's birthday today? Are these fireworks just to congratulate a certain girl on her birthday? What a grand gesture! Who on earth did this? Did he clear out all the fireworks in the capital? Naturally, in the middle, some people were already rushing towards the other side of the lake, wanting to find out. Tang Shui stood by the lake, staring blankly at the writing in the sky disappearing. When he came to his senses and looked ahead again, Tang Ning's figure had long since disappeared. That disappointment had long been thrown away by her. In the darkness, the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. In the woods behind her, a woman leaned against a tree and murmured, "I don't know which girl is in love today. She is so happy." Beside her, a man looked at the figure by the lake, and then looked at the direction where a certain figure disappeared, thoughtfully. Tang Ning stood in the darkness, looking at the figure by the lake. It was Tang Shui's birthday. As his cousin, he naturally had to show his appreciation, otherwise it would be too shameful. So he had people prepare these a day in advance, hoping to give her an unforgettable birthday. Girls generally like this kind of romantic thing. If he hadn't already picked up all the girls he should pick up, he wouldn't use this bottom of the box trick to pick up girls. Of course, he prepared these for Tang Shui as a simple birthday gift, not because he wanted to seduce her. He hid in the dark and took a look, but he couldn't see her expression clearly. He only felt that she seemed to be in a good mood, and her goal for today should have been achieved. When Tang Ning was about to leave, she saw a young man and woman walking arm in arm from the forest. He looked at the man and said in surprise, "Zhang." Zhang Chao's expression changed. He took a few steps forward, walked to him, and whispered, "Don't expose my identity, or I will tell you about stealing your cousin." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 539. People's words are scary. Although Tang Ning is on the right track, she doesn't want to be spread rumors. He glanced at Zhang Chao and said, "It's Captain Zhang, what a coincidence." He patted Zhang Chao's shoulder and left with a smile. Zhang Chao covered his shoulders and rubbed them vigorously. He looked at Tang Ning's back in surprise. He didn't know how he could have such strong hands when he looked so weak. The woman came up and asked, "Who is he?" Zhang Chao said, "It's a coincidence that he is a colleague in the army." The woman nodded, then looked at him in surprise and asked, "When did you get promoted to a full-time job and why didn't you tell me?" Zhang Chao said, "I was just promoted today, didn't I plan to give you a surprise?" When Tang Ning woke up and walked to the yard, she heard Qing and Xiu were still discussing the fireworks incident last night. During yesterday's fireworks show, Tang Ning ordered those people to use their special skills. Not to mention Qing and the others, even the emperor had never seen it. The people of the capital had never seen such a grand fireworks display, so it was normal. Today is the birthday of the Queen Mother. There is only one day difference between the Queen Mother's birthday and Tang Shui's birthday, but the scenes are completely different. The birthday banquet was held not in the palace, but in a royal garden outside the palace. Emperor Chen had people arrange the venue half a month in advance. When the sky darkened, all the lights in the garden were lit. Officials and dignitaries from the capital, along with their families, began to enter the garden one after another. When Tang Shui followed everyone in the Tang family into the garden, a figure also walked down from a carriage on the roadside. Princess Anyang looked at her and said, "Shui-er, wait a minute." Tang Shui stopped and waited for her to come with him. Princess Anyang came over and walked into the door with her. She turned her head and asked, "Where did you go last night?" "I went to the Tang family to look for you. Auntie said you were not here." "Tang Shuideo, I have something to go out." "You won't forget that yesterday was your birthday, right?" Princess Anyang looked at her and said, "Every year when you celebrate your birthday, we are all together. What did you do to go out last night?" Tang Shui said, "Nothing, just go out for a walk." Princess Anyang looked at her and asked, "Did you see the fireworks last night?" Tang Shui nodded and said, "I saw it." Princess Anyang said, "Yesterday was your birthday, and there happened to be such a fireworks display. Could it be that someone prepared it for you? I remember that no lady in the capital seemed to have a birthday yesterday. What are you thinking about?" Tang Shui glanced at her and said, "Who would prepare these for me?" "That's not necessarily true." Princess Anyang looked at her and said, "Perhaps some young master is blind and fell in love with you, the capital witch." Tang Shui raised his hand, ready to strike, when a voice suddenly came from the side. "So you are together." Tang Ning got off the carriage and saw Princess Anyang and Tang Shui. He walked over, looked at Tang Shui, and asked, "Are you satisfied with the gift I gave you yesterday?" Princess Anyang looked at him and asked, "What gift?" Tang Shui took her arm and said, "Hurry in." Princess Anyang was dragged in by her. Zhongyi came over, looked ahead, and asked, "What's wrong with them?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "Who knows what you women are thinking? The old saying that a woman's heart is under the sea is very true. She obviously likes the gift, but on the surface she still has to pretend to be indifferent. Tang Ning was hiding in the dark yesterday, and what she saw was that she was not as indifferent as before. After entering the garden, Zhongyi and Tang Yaoyao actually talked about yesterday's fireworks incident. Tang Yaoyao was very moved by this and seemed to want to invest in a fireworks shop. Zhongyi's focus was different, and she asked rather gossipily, "I wonder if the girl whose birthday was yesterday is with that person." Tang Ning looked at her and asked in surprise, "Why are we together?" Zhongyi looked at him and said, "Although I don't know who he is, he prepared such beautiful fireworks. Isn't he asking for love?" "Who said setting off fireworks means asking for love?" Tang Ning glanced at her and said, "Can't they just be friends or relatives?" Zhongyi smiled, shook his head and said, "My husband thinks too simply. If it wasn't for courtship, why would he send a beautiful fireworks?" Tang Ning was stunned and asked, "Does the capital have such rules?" No wonder Tang Ning always felt that something was wrong. According to his assumption, this trick should be suitable for such a scene. At night when the sky was full of stars, he and Zhao Man sat on the roof. Zhao Man leaned on his shoulder, and he pointed forward, and a brilliant fireworks immediately appeared in the distant sky. At this time, she would be moved and lie in his arms, and then. In this scene, Zhao Man could be Xiao Ru or Xiao Yi, but if it were Tang Shui he wouldn't be able to kiss her. If he had known that he would have given her something else yesterday, he might have made her think that he was really a beast and had something in mind for her. The Queen Mother's birthday banquet was separate for men and women. The female family members were in the innermost garden. Zhong Gai, Tang Yao Yao and him were separated outside. Tang Ning found his place, with Xiaoju beside him. Xiaoju saw him coming and pointed to the opposite side. Tang Ning looked over and spotted a figure she hadn't seen for a long time. During the 16 guards competition, Tang Zhao harmed many powerful children in Beijing, including the Prince of Dian. Fearing revenge from them, he had to flee to Jiangnan to avoid disaster and had not been to the Tang family for years. But what he didn't expect was that Tang Jing, the eldest son of the Tang family, was killed on the Lantern Festival. The Tang family had no descendants, so they could only send a letter to Jiangnan by express horse, asking him to return to Beijing immediately. From this point of view, Tang Huai was quite selfless. After all, if he had another wife, he could create another heir for the Tang family before he died. After returning to the Tang family, Tang Zhao was naturally no longer the second son of the Tang family, but the only heir of the Tang family. His every move represented the Tang family. Even if the Prince of Dian and others had a grudge against him, they had to consider whether they could afford to offend or whether it was worth offending the Tang family. Xiaoju said, "Tang Ersha is really a fool with good fortune. Tang Jing is dead, and the Tang family can only vigorously train him now." The saying that fools are lucky is also true. After Tang Jing died, the Tang family had no choice but to choose Tang Zhao, who was originally a playboy who lived a life of idleness and waited for death, but suddenly became the helmsman of a big family. I just don't know, with Tang Zhao's ability, will the big ship of the Tang family turn over in his hands? In a palace in the garden, Emperor Chen stood outside the palace. A young eunuch stepped forward and whispered, "Your Majesty, the Queen Mother fell asleep." Emperor Chen rubbed his eyebrows and murmured, "Why did she fall asleep again?" Chen Tailing stood beside him and whispered, "Your Majesty, sleepiness is one of the symptoms of the Queen Mother's illness." Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "Has Dr. Sun not been found yet?" Chen Tailing said, "Your Majesty, there is no trace of him yet." He thought for a while and said, "Although it is difficult to find Dr. Sun, there is another person who may have some solutions." Emperor Chen said, "Who is it?" Chen Tailing bowed and said, "Lord Tang is the junior brother of Dr. Sunday. Some of his methods are beyond the reach of the Imperial Medical Bureau." Emperor Chen showed a look of realization on his face and said, "How could I forget him?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 540. Tang Zhao's different identity has aroused widespread discussion in a small area. Xiaoju looked at the proud Tang Zhao, looked around and saw that no one was paying attention, then looked at Tang Ning and asked in a low voice, "Do you think Brother Han will take revenge on the Tang family again?" Tang Ning said, "No. Although strictly speaking, there is no such thing as one life for another. It makes sense for the Tang family to let the Han family eliminate the queen, and Wu Lihao kills a few more to eliminate the Tang family's queen, but Wu Lihao promised him that he would not do it again. Take action, a person like him should not go back on his word." Xiaoju looked at him and was about to ask again when a young eunuch walked to Tang Ning and whispered, "Master Tang, your Majesty has summoned you." Although she didn't know why Chen Huang summoned him at this time, Tang Ning still stood up and followed the young eunuch inside. The royal garden here is divided into the inner garden and the outer garden. The two gardens separate the male and female family members. The daughters of the powerful and wealthy families in the capital, the imperial wives, princesses and princesses, etc. are all in the inner garden. When the birthday banquet officially begins, everyone will move into the hall. By then, Men and women will also be divided into two halls. At this moment, the birthday banquet has not yet begun. In the inner garden, the girls gather together in twos and threes, talking and laughing quietly. Hey, did you see the fireworks last night? The fireworks were set off for such a long time and were so loud. We are not mute or deaf, so how could we not see them? There are fireworks in the capital every year, but after watching them for more than 10 years, I haven't seen anything as beautiful as yesterday. It is said that the fireworks were set off by a woman. I don't know whose daughter she is. It makes people very envious. Last night, I remember, Tang Shui's birthday seems to be within these days. I don't know if it was yesterday. In a remote corner of the garden, Princess Anyang looked at Tang Shui and said, "Isn't it your cousin who gave it to you? Is it necessary to hide it from me?" Tang Shuideo, he doesn't have any other intentions. Princess Anyang glanced at her and asked, "Did I say he had other intentions?" Tang Shui ignored her. Princess Anyang touched her with her arm and said, "You don't know if he has any other intentions. Even if he does, it's nothing. People say, cousin, cousin, they are a perfect match, and so are cousins." Tang Shui looked at her and said, "You know, my sister-in-law picked me up. We are not cousins." "Isn't that better?" Princess Anyang looked at her and said, "Count how many fools will be born to those who marry their cousins in Beijing. You don't have to worry about this." Tang Shui pinched her mouth and said, "A dog cannot spit out ivory from its mouth." Princess Anyang pinched her mouth, made an inarticulate sound, opened her hand, and then said, "I don't plan to get married anyway." "If you really don't plan to get married, otherwise we will stay together like this for the rest of our lives, let's go together." Princess Anyang and Tang Shui were fighting together. On the other side, Zhao Man watched Tang Yaoyao and Zhongyi still discussing the fireworks. Zhao Man finally couldn't help it, looked at them and said, "You really don't do you know who set off the fireworks last night?" Zhongyi looked at her in surprise and asked, "Who is it?" Zhao Man rolled his eyes and said, "Who else can create such a big battle every time? Is it brother Xiaoning?" So are you finally seemed to remember something and said, "Yesterday seemed to be cousin Tang Shui's birthday. I heard my mother say." Although Zhongyi was a little surprised, she still shook her head and said, "It turns out to be cousin Tang Shui. I thought who was wooing some girl." Tang Yaoyao glanced at her mouth and said, "What's wrong with my cousin? What kind of cousin is my sister? I'm no different from anyone else." She looked at Zhao Man and changed the subject. "Xiao Man, what gift are you planning to give to the Queen Mother? Didn't you bring it with you?" Tang Yaoyao called her Xiao Man, which made Zhao Man a little depressed. According to the order, she should call herself Sister Xiao Man, but who knows what kind of marriage her father gave her halfway, and she suddenly changed from the third lady to the third lady. After becoming the fourth lady, she might become the fifth lady or something. You know, she was originally supposed to call Tang Yaoyao Xiaoyao. The expression on her face was a little depressed, and she said, "You will know in a while." "Xiao Man, long time no see." A voice came from behind. Zhao Man turned around, looked at the figure walking over, and said, "Sister Yi Yang." Although she and Princess Yi Yang are both princesses, Princess Yi Yang is a few years older than her and married out of the palace a few years before her. When they were children in the palace, the two did not interact with each other and did not have any deep friendship with each other. Because Princess Yi Yang had a bad atmosphere in Beijing, she never had any contact with her after leaving the palace. Princess Yi Yang looked at her and asked, "I heard that you became a monk for the sake of the Queen Mother's health." Zhao Man nodded and said, "I want to practice for 3 years and pray for the Emperor's grandmother." Princess Yi Yang clicked her tongue and said, "You are destined to be a slave to your husband, can you pray for the Queen Mother? Besides, no one in the capital is willing to marry you. What will we do if we delay for another 3 years and cannot get married?" There is no princess in the royal family that cannot be married off. Princess Yi Yang never lowered her voice when she spoke, and the people around her heard her clearly. Everyone had heard that Princess Yi Yang was unruly and sarcastic, but they never thought that she was also so mean to her sister. What she just said was really unpleasant. Zhao Man blushed with anger. Princess Yi Yang looked at her and felt much better. There were many princesses in the royal family, but she was the only one who became a nun to pray for the Queen Mother. It seemed that other princesses were not as filial as her. People always praised Princess Ping Yang, but they didn't say much good things about Princess Yi Yang. She looked at Zhao Man and was about to speak when she suddenly felt cold all over. She subconsciously looked to the side and found a figure standing not far away looking at her. Although she couldn't see his eyes clearly, she was terrified. This man was a man, not a eunuch, but he could appear here. More importantly, it made her feel very uncomfortable. Princess Yi Yang frowned and said sternly, "Who are you? Where are the guards? How did this person get in?" The little eunuch who followed Tang Ning immediately stepped forward and explained, "Princess, this is Lord Tang Ning. His Majesty summoned him here." Tang Ning, Princess Yi Yang remembered this name and narrowed her eyes. The eunuch next to Tang Ning looked at him and said, "Lord Tang, let's go quickly. Don't let His Majesty and the Queen Mother wait anxiously." Tang Ning glanced at Princess Yi Yang and followed the eunuch inside. Princess Yi Yang frowned and followed. However, just as she took a step, she suddenly felt a pain in her knee. One leg bent down, and her body lost balance and fell to the ground. She cried ouch, and the people around her hurried to help her. Princess Yi Yang stood up, looked around, and didn't know what happened just now. She cursed a few words and limped forward. Tang Yao Yao clapped her hands and threw away the other stone in her palm. Zhao Man looked at her with satisfaction, not caring that she just called herself Xiao Man, looked at Zhongyi and the others, and said, "I'll go and see too." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 541. I see your Majesty and the Queen Mother. Tang Ning was led by the young eunuch and walked slowly into the inner hall. She bowed to Emperor Chen and an old woman sitting at the top. In this hall, Emperor Chen was standing, and she was the only one sitting, so naturally she was the Queen Mother. As for the other people in the palace, including Prince Kong, Prince Duan, Prince Huai and several concubines, Tang Ning stopped saluting. Yi Yang has met the father, the Queen Mother, and several empresses. Tang Ning stepped in, and Princess Yi Yang followed by Zhao Man. After bowing to everyone, she stood aside. Emperor Chen looked at Tang Ning and said, "I asked you to come here this time because I want you to take a look at the Queen Mother's illness. The Imperial Medical Office is helpless. Is there anything you can do?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "May I ask your Majesty, what disease does the Queen Mother suffer from?" Emperor Chen looked at Chen Tai-ling and said, "Just tell me." Dr. Chen immediately stepped forward, looked at Tang Ning, and said, "The Imperial Medical Office originally thought that the Queen Mother was suffering from diabetes, but no matter whether she used the prescription for upper elimination or the lower elimination prescription, the Queen Mother's condition was different. Can't get better." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "What are the symptoms of the Queen Mother's condition?" Dr. Chen ordered, "Drinking too much, eating too much, lethargy, and urinating frequently. In addition, the Queen Mother's body is deficient in yin and yang, with blood stasis in the collaterals, loss of nourishment in the meridians, and disordered qi and blood, which is exactly the reason for elimination." Symptoms of thirst. Diabetes syndrome is the name of a traditional Chinese medicine disease. Its pathological manifestations are exactly the same as diabetes. Without modern detection methods, it is difficult to distinguish them. The causes and treatments of the two are completely different. If diabetes is regarded as diabetes, treatment will naturally not be good. Even the Imperial Medical Office couldn't cure it, indicating that the Queen Mother was actually suffering from diabetes, not diabetes. This is also the crux of the problem, because even in the 21st century with advanced technology, diabetes can only be controlled but cannot be cured, let alone now. After all, he cannot synthesize insulin manually. Tang Ning looked at Emperor Chen and said, "Reporting to your majesty, the Queen Mother is not suffering from diabetes." After hearing this, Imperial Physician Chen's heart immediately pounded. His Majesty was dissatisfied with the Imperial Medical Office because of concubine Shu's illness last time. If they made the wrong diagnosis again this time, it would not be as simple as dismissal from office. Did the Imperial Medical Office make a mistake again? Emperor Chen frowned and asked, "Then what disease is the Queen Mother suffering from?" The Imperial Medical Office cannot be blamed for this matter. Although this disease is common, it is indistinguishable from diabetes mellitus. Even if Dr. Sun were here, he would probably treat it as diabetes mellitus. Tang Ning first reported to the Imperial Medical Office. He said a few good words. After all, this is the limitation of knowledge, and the imperial doctors did nothing wrong. Imperial Physician Chen cast a grateful look at him. Emperor Chen looked at him again and said, "What exactly is this disease?" Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "This disease is called wealth's disease." In addition to the Emperor and Queen Mother, there are also less elegant words such as princess and empress, shit and piss, so it is best to pay attention to them. "How come I haven't heard of the disease of wealth and honor?" Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "What is the cause of this disease?" Tang Ning said, "The cause of wealthy people's disease is mainly that the pancreatic beta cells do not secrete enough insulin, or the insulin secreted cannot function to absorb and convert glucose. This will lead to the accumulation of too much glucose in the blood and increase blood sugar, thus causing a range of symptoms." "What beta, and what are you doing?" Chen Huang was stunned when he heard this, and even Chen Tai had an expression of confusion on his face. "It's all nonsense." Princess Yi Yang stood up angrily, looked at Emperor Chen, and said, "Father, listen to what this person said is all nonsense. How can there be any disease of wealth?" He didn't even listen. I said, "Do you really want him to treat the Queen Mother? If something goes wrong, even chopping his head 100 times won't be enough." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "Princess, if you don't believe it, you can verify it." Princess Yi Yang raised her eyebrows and asked, "How to verify?" Tang Ning said, "As we all know, those suffering from diabetes will have a sweet taste in their urine, but this is not necessarily the case for those suffering from affluence. Princess, she only needs to try it, and she will know whether the Queen Mother is suffering from diabetes." After Princess Yi Yang reacted, she glared at him, You asked me to drink." Chen Huang glanced at her and said, "Don't interrupt." Princess Yi Yang's face turned red, and after her chest heaved a few times, she shut her mouth obediently, but her eyes were fixed on Tang Ning, filled with resentment. Chen Huang looked at Tang Ning again and said, "You should make it simpler." Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "To put it simply, there is something wrong with an organ in the Queen Mother's body." Chen Huang looked at him and asked, "What next?" Tang Ning said, "No more." Emperor Chen frowned and asked, "No more?" Tang Ning explained, "The organs in the human body complement each other and cooperate with each other. No matter which one of them has a problem, it will affect the whole body. If there is a problem with one of the Queen Mother's organs, several symptoms will appear." Emperor Chen said simply, "Tell me directly, can the Queen Mother's illness be cured?" "It's hopeless." Tang Ning answered more simply. He was not even a miracle doctor, let alone a god. For hundreds or thousands of years, only gods could save the Queen Mother from her illness. The atmosphere in the room was a bit quiet, and Tang Ning was keenly aware that Chen Huang's face darkened. He thought for a moment and said, "Although this disease cannot be cured, some measures can be taken to prolong life. If the condition is well controlled, the Queen Mother's illness will rarely relapse." Emperor Chen couldn't wait to ask, what measures? Tang Ning glanced at Princess Yi Yang and said, I also know a folk remedy that can exchange the blood of a healthy person for the Queen Mother. Although it will damage the vitality and lifespan of this person, the Queen Mother may live 10 years longer. Is there such a method? After countless facts, Emperor Chen had little doubt about Tang Ning's words and immediately said, I will find someone immediately. Tang Ning shook his head and said, this person cannot be someone else, but can only be the blood of the Queen Mother. Their blood will not be rejected by the Queen Mother's body, otherwise there will be more serious harm. King Kong and Prince Duan raised their eyebrows when they heard this, and each of them took a half step back without leaving any trace, and their eyes looking at Tang Ning also became alert. Tang Ning continued, in addition, it must be a woman. Kong Wang and Duan Wang breathed a sigh of relief, but Princess Yi Yang's heart skipped a beat. She immediately looked at Zhao Man and said, Xiao Man is the most filial. For the Queen Mother, she is willing to become a Taoist priest. She is also young, and it's okay to lose a few years of life. Tang Ning shook his head and said, it is precisely because Princess Pingyang is young and unmarried, and her blood is extremely strong. The Queen Mother's body may not be able to bear it. He thought for a while and said, I wonder if there is a married princess who is a few years older than Princess Pingyang in the royal family. Lord, using their blood to exchange for the Queen Mother is the most suitable choice. Emperor Chen thought for a moment and said, there are a few people who can do this. Yi Yang, Fuang, and Jinping are all suitable. Tang Ning asked, may I ask your majesty, do Princess Fuang and Princess Jinping have any children? Emperor Chen nodded and said, they both have children. Do we have to choose those with children? Tang Ning shook his head and said, after a woman gives birth, her blood is greatly damaged. We must choose a princess without children to exchange blood. Princess Yi Yang trembled and her face turned pale.